You're listening to One Bright Star's Life After Loss, a podcast that's focused on the lifelong journey of life after loss, with your hosts Erica Fisher and Alicia Moore. One Bright Star's Life After Loss podcast is sponsored by the law firm of Burkholz and Associates. And now, One Bright Star's Life After Loss podcast.
Hello and welcome to One Bright Star's Life After Loss podcast. I'm Erica Fisher, Executive Director for One Bright Star.
And Alicia Moore, President of One Bright Star.
And today we have with us Rachael Hanel. Hello, Rachael.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, we're so excited to have you. And Rachael is the author of We'll Be the Last Ones to Let You Down, Memoir of a Gravedigger's Daughter. Wow, Rachael, you're a very, very, very talented writer.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
It was a fun book to read. It was engaging, and it was really interesting to get that perspective of death from another point of view. Tell us a little bit about it, Rachael.
Yeah, so my dad was a gravedigger in Waseca, Minnesota. He did that for maybe 13 years or so, and that's the only job I knew him doing. I'm the youngest of the family, so I think he started that when I was about 2, so that's what I remember him doing. And yeah, I just kind of grew up in that environment. I would go to work with him often, and he and my mom also mowed and maintained cemeteries. So that was really the bulk of their job, where they were in the cemeteries, especially in the summer, like all day long. And when I was really little, I would just go along with them to the cemetery. So I definitely feel like I grew up in that environment.
Yes, yes. And it's neat when you talk about all of the gravestones that you see and then the families, and you talk about the stories there. But a little bit about the book, the neat perspective is when you mentioned how that a family will come, they will have the ceremony where they bury their loved one, or they have the last rites there. Mm-hmm. And then everyone leaves, and then that's when your dad goes to work.
Yes.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So that was another thing that I did there. You know, I was often there with my dad during a graveside service, and we would be, you know, in the back, kind of as far away as you can be. You know, in a large cemetery, you can be completely hidden, but in smaller cemeteries, you're just kind of in the back, maybe behind some trees or something. And so I would be watching that from afar. You know, I'd be watching that ceremony happen. But yes, certainly everybody leaves, and then my dad comes in, and maybe the funeral director is there yet. My dad comes in, the vault guy comes in, you know, the coffin is placed inside of a vault. So the vault guy's there, and they lower it down, and then the vault guy leaves, and my dad shovels the dirt in and fixes it all up.
Oh.
And he fixes it up to the point where, as you said in the book, you don't even know that anything was moved.
Yeah, he was very particular.
Yes.
So he wanted to make sure that it looked like nobody had been there. He would get sod from sodding companies, you know, to put back over. We would come along, we would water it. He had kind of this giant watering thing in the back of his truck, and we'd water that grass and really work hard to try to make it as seamless as possible.
And you know, what's I find interesting is that at least maybe it's just some of the cemeteries that I have been to locally or just around here, but it's not done that way.
No.
Because there is usually there's the dirt and that stuff, the sod. When you talked about that in your book, it's almost like your dad just took it to another level.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just not the way things are handled. Maybe they don't have full-time people. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. I've seen that too. And I suppose sometimes it has to do with maybe the time of year, you know, kind of, this is the perfect time to lay down some sod, you know, of how that's all taken care of. So yeah, I think different people do it different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
And something that you kind of talk about in your book too is how you viewed death. You saw it from one side, but then, and I think you told us that when we were visiting, that you knew death but not grief. And tell us how that came about.
Yeah, so I would say, yes, I was very familiar with this concept of death, that people died. I saw it all the time, you know, being in the cemeteries. My dad comes from a pretty large family, large extended family, so I had gone to a lot of wakes and funerals myself, you know, so I knew that people died. But until it really hits your own family,
Right.
until you have that personal experience, like there's no amount of preparation that
Right.
would prepare you
Yes.
for something like that. And so my dad died when I was 15. He was 46, and it was a very, very sudden, unexpected loss. So it just kind of threw all of us, because it was just very, very different, than anything that I'd been through
Right.
before.
Right.
Yeah.
And your family, with your dad working with the local funeral directors, you always were used to working with them business-wise.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden your mom had to...
Work with on the other side.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was the customer.
Yeah.
And that had to be so difficult for your mom
Yeah.
to do, because she had always worked right alongside your dad.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember really vividly in the hospital right after my dad died, then you have to call someone, right? And I remember my brother asking my mom, who do I call? Because there were 2 funeral directors in Waseca, and who do I call? There's 2 of them. We know them both really, really well.
Right.
Then you kind of think, is one going to be upset
Right.
that they didn't get the call? But I just remember, who should I call? And Mom having to make that kind of snap decision, which I suppose is why people always encourage people to have directives
a plan in
Right.
place,
and
yeah.
a plan in
Yes.
place, so you're not at the hospital thinking about all those things that you have to do.
Right. Just on such
Wow.
short notice.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
You had mentioned to us too about it was difficult for your family after your dad passed, and maybe you can share a little bit about that and what helped you
Sure.
with the process, because as you said, you were just 15,
Yes.
and that's a really vulnerable time.
Yes, it is. I feel like things could have gone very badly.
Yeah, you're amazing.
But it didn't.
And so, yeah,
Right.
you're wonderful.
Exactly.
And I think about myself losing my dad at 15,
Yeah.
and I mean, my dad's still alive now, and
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I'm 40 now, and I can't
know.
imagine losing him.
No, it's always
Right.
so hard.
It was hard saying that I was 40 as well.
Yes.
I
but-
feel that too. Like,
Yeah, I know. It hurt a little bit. But yeah, I can't imagine being 15.
Yeah. It was one of those things, and I'm the youngest by quite a few years. So my sister was already married and had a child, and she's kind of has her own life, not really far away. She was just up in the Minneapolis area. My brother's a lot older than I am. He has kind of his own life going on. So I think what happened is we all just kind of retreated into our own lives, didn't really come
Right.
together as a family, because we were all kind of doing our separate things anyway, even before this. So for me, and also that classic stoic Midwestern
Yes.
ethos as well, where, we don't want to talk about this, and we don't want to talk about our feelings or admit that we're sad, so it's kind of like, well, okay, we're all doing fine. That's great. But it was really my friends. And this is where I think when we talk about children, like children are so inquisitive, like they are not afraid to just ask questions, because they just want to know. They're curious.
Yes.
And I was 15, but I think you're still kind of in that in-between stage. And so my friends were really curious, and they would ask me questions. And that was so therapeutic, because I felt like somebody cared enough
Right.
to know. They weren't asking out of some kind of morbid curiosity. Like they just really, truly wanted to know, what was it like? What happened? How are you doing? And, I had a really, really good group of friends. And so I was in high school at this time. And, I'd already been pretty active in high school and extracurriculars and that kind of thing. But I just kept doing that. And that was just such a relief that I could be at school. I could get to school early and do band, and then be in school with my friends. And then after school, do cross country or theater or something. And because I felt like home was so sad, it's just like,
You had to
there's-
keep yourself busy.
yeah, so I kept myself busy. I suppose that could be, avoidance or something. And I
Well-
would fully admit that. But
Well,
yeah.
being that your friends, the statement you said about your friends being inquisitive and how therapeutic that was for you,
Yes.
like to talk about your dad and and I think that's very similar to what our mission is to say their name, to
Yes.
ask questions, and to carry on their memory.
Right.
You know, I think that's a huge thing.
I think a lot of people are afraid to bring up a loved one who has died to the family member. Like, oh, I'm going to make them sad. Well, number one, they're sad already anyway, right? Like,
Right.
it's not going to be your questioning that's going to make them sad. And they're going to feel actually probably really happy to talk about this person they loved so much. I mean, if people ask me about my dad, like, I'm just so happy to tell them about my dad.
You wrote a book about it.
I wrote a whole book about him.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I think, when you were talking about high school and going and doing those things, it kind of reminded me of a routine. You had a routine and you were able to continue to do that. And I know just from talking to parents and other folks that have had a loss, it is really hard to get back into that routine. But once you do it, that is helpful. But, they talked about every day is really challenging.
Yeah.
And fortunately, you were at an age where, and your friends, I mean, they're really important.
Yeah.
And they did keep you going, and you got to school and you did your thing. And there's nothing wrong with saying at home it was sad.
Yeah.
Your mom was, she lost that main support person. And unfortunately, this was at a time when, as you said, no one talked about it.
Yeah.
Everybody just expected, oh, that's really, they felt really bad for the Hanel family. But, everybody just kind of goes about their business. Nobody talks about it too much.
Yep.
And I'm so thankful now that we have something like compassionate communities that you're involved with, Erica. And there's just bringing so much more awareness to the fact that we need to support, talk, because like you said, it's not going to change. Not talking about them doesn't make it any better.
Right. It probably makes it worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we're learning that we need to talk about it. We need to support people and ask. And if we haven't, Eric and I are so very fortunate to not have lost a child. Or our parents. We're very fortunate with that. But yet, it will come because it's going to.
It's life. It's real life. And it happens to be the elephant in the room, but we have, as a community, we have to come together and
talk about it.
Yeah.
And
each other's therapy.
Right. And I'm so glad you're doing something like this. I mean, if just one person listening can reach out to someone they know who's just lost someone, I mean, that's great.
And each story I feel that we share is, it touches somebody, for sure.
It is. It's very beneficial. And that's what was really neat about your book. And we talked about it a little earlier, too. Having humor.
Yeah.
Death and loss is very heavy. It's difficult. It's, that is just, it's that unimaginable pain and heartache. And not that you laugh all the time, but you have to be able to, when you're, sharing the memories, you have to be able to laugh and remember those good times. But the one comment in there about your dad seeing the lady cross the street and business is kind of slow and he kind of hits the gas a little bit. I mean, I know I just burst out laughing. I was reading the book with my husband. We were driving and he wanted to know what was so funny. So I had to read that to him and it was good.
I could totally see Marvin say something like that, actually.
It was. I could too. Yeah. So I just loved it. I love that you shared that humor.
Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, that just kind of encapsulates my dad's personality, but you do need that because, obviously he knew the heaviness that he was dealing with every day. I mean, but if that's the only part you concentrated on, I don't know how anybody could do a job like that or a funeral director or anybody, a doctor, like an emergency medicine doctor who's seeing a lot of death.
Yes.
It would get you down so quickly that you have to, be able to have, it may be a dark sense of humor, but you still, appropriate, of course, but you still, need to find a little bit of levity where you can.
Right. I never realized that, but now because we have people included in a part of One Bright Star that are funeral directors.
Oh yeah, sure.
And
yes.
They are all funny.
I was going to say, you probably won't find a funnier person than a funeral director.
Yes.
Jonna has a very good sense of humor.
Yes, she does.
Gayla is hilarious.
Yes.
You know Gayla?
Gayla and Kevin, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they are great.
They're funny people.
They're exactly what I'm thinking of in that regard.
Yes.
Like they seem genuinely fun, and somewhere that stereotype came about of like the dour funeral director, the
Yes.
creepy gravedigger. I'm like, where did that even come from? Because everyone I know
They're
is
real people,
Exactly.
just like everybody
Yes.
else. Yeah.
pretty friendly and pretty funny.
Actually, they're
Yeah.
quite uplifting.
Yeah.
And that's what we need when, we need to know that there's that side too, because they deal with such, like you said, such heavy, difficult moments in that. So
Yeah, we all have
we're
our
thankful.
coping mechanisms.
Right. Right.
Yeah, humor is a big one of mine, I think,
Yeah.
because I don't know.
Yes,
It's-
we need that. The
Laughing,
other
yeah.
thing you talked about in there too, and I loved how you ended the book because I just thought it was perfect when you were talking about, it had been about death and seeing other families, and you kind of revisited that history, which I felt like it was just a great read on Waseca County too. It was just really fascinating and interesting. But then you talk about your dad and the loss, and then how your family had been doing, and then you just talked about your blessings and how thankful you were. And so I really just thought you ended it on a perfect note.
Yeah, thank you. And I really wanted to do that. I really want this book to be really about hope, how you do move through something like that, and I always say you don't ever get over it, right? But you move through it. And
That's a
Yes.
perfect way
Yeah.
That
to
is.
say it. You do move through it.
you don't move on, you move through
Right.
it.
Right, your journey.
Yeah, and it's going to be different than anybody else's, but I want to just, because I do feel like I have moved through it, and am able to see,
Right.
the bright spots too.
And that it is, that's really courageous and an accomplishment. And maybe an accomplishment isn't what I want to say. It's courageous and brave of you to be able to say that, yes, I did move through that, and I can look back and I want to find, the bright spots. If you could change anything, knowing what you know now with your experiences, how would you have changed things, or what would you have done differently?
Yeah, well, number one, I just think about my dad and how suddenly he passed away, and it ended up being cancer. But like those signs were there really months before.
Okay.
If you really start to look back on it, like his back hurt, just things like that.
Sure. Okay.
So I would just say, well, maybe as soon as somebody feels sick, go to the doctor.
Right.
So it's like, well, but again, you kind of have
Right.
like that tough, I can tough this out. It's just a back strain or something.
I don't know any man,
Yeah.
or even know many women. I'm not a doctor goer.
Yeah.
I work at the hospital. But
Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah, like pay attention, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Pay attention to your body. So that would be one thing I would do. But also, I probably would try to find a way for my family to talk about it, or maybe I could have been the one to say, like, maybe not take the lead from them, or they're all kind of doing their own things, but really speaking up and saying, hey, you know what, I want to talk about this.
Right.
Yeah, like
Right.
that would have been a good thing to do, I think.
And to this day, have you?
Oh yeah,
Like,
I think
okay.
definitely. As you get older,
Yeah.
that you can talk through things
Talk
more.
about it,
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
And as you have moved through more of it, it's easier because some things are not as raw.
Exactly.
And that. And then the other thing is that you were the youngest, though.
Yeah.
So I kind of put you on the spot when I said, what would you have done differently? Because you were only 15. And it's
Right.
hard for everyone. No one knows how they will respond.
Yeah.
Well, 15 is a tough age
Yes.
to start with.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But thankfully now in our society, we are more open and speaking and sharing. And your book is an example of
Right.
helping people talk about that.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yes. Yes.
Definitely.
And I would recommend it to anyone. It's just a really relaxing, it's a fun read. It's very interesting. And as I told you, makes me want to go to a couple of these cemeteries. I have been to them, but I have not seen some of the stones that you talk about in there.
Yeah.
And so that's neat. It's a neat legacy that your dad and mom have left.
For
So,
sure.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that a lot from people that after they read about the cemeteries and the stories that they, and I know they have gone to them to see them for themselves.
I Googled.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did.
Did you?
I was Googling
Okay.
things. I was like, oh, I never, wow.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
telling
Yeah.
Alicia I used to have a little map available on my website, and I guess it just disappeared. So I should probably make a new one. where
that'd be cool.
Yeah, like it was just
You
a Google map.
should.
Like here's where the cemeteries
That would be
are.
really cool. You should do
Right.
that.
Yeah, I'll recreate that.
That's neat.
And then I'll post it on the Facebook.
Oh, sure, that would be cool.
One Bright Star.
Rachel, when we were talking about, you talked about your grandparents, you had mentioned them, and you have the history in there. I don't know if it was your grandpa or your grandmother, but one of them just had such tragic loss of his family, parents, and everything when he was so young.
Yeah.
And then they grew up, and again, in the era where no one talked about it, and they were just so stoic. And both of them had losses. My grandpa had his parents died in the 1918 flu epidemic, so that really was like, oh, last year was like, hey, we've been here before, right? Yeah. And then my grandma had 2 babies die within like 3 months of each other for the whooping cough epidemic. But, I knew that they had these losses in their lives, but these were like the most, just if you think about ideal grandparents, they were just ideal grandparents. They were like the most loving and fun and like full of joy, So I think that I grew up just kind of subconsciously taking that in, like knowing that, they had some pretty devastating losses, but here they are, like full of
they still love
joy
everything,
and life.
Yeah.
They were really, really cool. Great role models.
And that's really good. That, yes, like you said, giving you hope.
Yeah.
And that's what we've talked about, Eric and I have talked about before, when we visit with people, and especially our parents and folks that we meet that have lost a child or a young sibling or something, that the tragedy, out of that tragedy, they actually give us hope because they continue on. And like you said, and then they engaged in life, and they were wonderful parents, grandparents, and
they moved through it.
Yes. I really like that.
I love that. I
am too.
Yeah, I really feel that. And I think it just helps us to not feel alone. We might have our own personal tragedies, but to think like, okay, I know other people have been through this too, and they have somehow managed. Maybe I can manage too, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Good.
Well, and to reach out to other people.
Of course.
When I'm having difficulties in my life or something, I reach out to my friends. I call Alicia, or there's so many people that we can reach out to, and that we need to make sure that it's okay to reach out to people about death too.
Absolutely,
especially because grief is definitely, like you said, heavy.
It's heavy, and it's very lonely. People are often very alone in their grief, and let's try to find a way to change that.
Absolutely. And that's what our mission is that we want to remember the lost children, family members, everybody, and to grieve together. And then it's okay to grieve.
Yes.
So we just need to hold hands during this journey.
Yes.
All right. If you have a chance, please check out Rachel's book. We'll be the last ones to let you down. Memoir of a Gravedigger's Daughter. It's pretty amazing. All right. Thank you so much for being here, Rachel.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely. We'll have you back again.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Until next time, this is Erica Fisher
and Alicia Moore
with One Bright Star's Life After Loss podcast. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to One Bright Star's Life After Loss podcast. Life After Loss is a copyrighted production of One Bright Star. One Bright Star's Life After Loss podcast is sponsored by the law firm of Berkholtz and Associates. For more information on the lifelong journey after losing a loved one, please visit our website at onebrightstar.org. Thanks for listening to One Bright Star's Life After Loss podcast. Life After Loss is a copyrighted production of One Bright Star. One Bright Star's Life After Loss podcast is sponsored by the law firm of Berkholtz and Associates. For more information on the lifelong journey after losing a loved one, please visit our website at onebrightstar.org.